In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating the exciting PowerShell workflow activity that's new to Adaptiva version 5.5. With this activity, PowerShell can be incorporated into many areas of the product and can be hooked into several built-in events. It can also be extended to perform PowerShell functions on demand, both internal to the product and for external automation of almost any conceivable task. In this example, I'm going to demonstrate how to leverage PowerShell and the workflow engine to create a config manager collection and retrieve the resultant collection ID. For those unfamiliar with the Workflow Designer, it can be located under the Miscellaneous folder within the Workbench. The Workflow Designer consists of four main panels. The panel on the left contains the Workflow Explorer, showing folders containing the existing workflows, and the Workflow Palette, showing all the available workflow activities. The panel in the center is the Workflow Designer workspace. And this is where you visually design your workflow. The bottom panel shows the workflow errors and warnings that may be present during the design stage. The panel on the right shows three property views that are context-specific to the currently selected activity. It also contains the Workflow Designer outline, which shows the current workflow design in a tree view. The first thing I need to do when creating a workflow is decide what sort of workflow it is that I want to create. I have three workflow types available to me: a client workflow which executes on the client, a server workflow which executes on the server, or a business workflow which also executes on the server but also allows for a form to be specified and can be launched directly from the workbench. For the purposes of this example, I'm going to create a business workflow. Now, the first thing I need to do is give the workflow a name. The workflow name is a property of the start node. I'm going to call this Adaptiva PowerShell example. I'm now going to create a new PowerShell activity. I'm going to give the activity a name and a description and a prefix. This is the name given to it when it's placed onto the workspace. I'm also going to add some properties. I'm going to add one for the collection name, and it's going to be a text property. It's also going to be an input property. I'm going to make it a mandatory property, and I'm going to say that this value can be initialized at design time and changed at runtime. I'm going to create another property for the limiting collection, and this is also mandatory. I'm also going to add an output property to output the collection ID for the newly created collection. The output property name must match the property name of the output object within my script. I'm going to flick over to the PowerShell script tab at the top and paste in my script. We can see that we've defined two parameters for the two properties specified in the Activity Details tab. I'm then importing the module, connecting to the drive, and creating the new Config Manager device collection. I'm storing the result in an object variable, and that object variable has a property of collection ID, which matches the name of my output parameter. I'll click OK on this, and we can see a new activity has been created within the workflow activities. I can then drag this below the start node in my workflow, and if I scroll down on the list of built-in properties, at the bottom I can see the three properties that I defined, my two input properties and my output property. I can then define the name that I want to give the collection and the collection ID for the limiting collection. I'm going to use all systems, so I'm going to say SMS00001. I can then save and deploy this workflow, and if I flick over to the Workflow Explorer, I can see my workflow has been created at the bottom. I can right-click on this and select Launch. This will launch the workflow, and if I flick over into Config Manager and go to Device Collections, if I refresh my list of device collections, we can see the Adaptiva PowerShell test collection has been created and is updating membership. It's possible to extend this further and create a user form to allow the input properties to be specified at runtime. I've created a form using the Form Designer and incorporated it into this workflow. We can see on the Start node that a launch form has been specified. In this workflow, I'm also taking the resultant collection ID from the collection that we've just created and outputting it into ctemp Adaptiva. If I launch this workflow, we can see the form appears, and I can specify the name of my collection and my limiting collection ID within the form. If I click OK on this, the workflow will run, the collection will be created, and the collection ID will be output to this text file. If we go to the Configuration Manager console and refresh device collections, we can see that the new collection has been created and that the collection ID is C9, which is the collection ID that has been output in the text file. As you can see, it's possible to have full two-way interaction with PowerShell, passing properties in and receiving output back. This can then be combined with other aspects of the workflow designer to provide logical decisions, parallel processing, or working with other areas of the system, such as the file system, registry, WMI, SQL, and many others. These activities can all be found within the workflow designer palette and can simply be dragged and dropped into the appropriate part of the workflow. We have if statements, support for looping, parallel execution, working with the file system, Windows registry, working with WMI, and SQL. And over 160 other built-in activities. It's also possible to take this one step further and convert the completed workflow into standalone executable. This executable can then be given out to a help desk, third-line support team, or even an end user, and will perform the tasks defined in the workflow. If a change is made to the workflow centrally, it is automatically updated on the client, so the next time the executable is run, the latest version of the workflow is executed, without having to redistribute a new file. This functionality is all built into the product and can be located in the Tool Foundry perspective under the Miscellaneous folder. To generate an executable, I simply give the executable a name, choose a location to store it, specify my server workflow, optionally add in any parameters that I wish to pass in on the command line, and then click Generate Tool. I choose a location to place the tool, and we can see that it has successfully generated the tool to the ctemp Adaptiva location. I can then run the tool in command prompt, pass in the name of the collection to be created, and the limiting collection ID, hit enter, and then flick over to Config Manager and refresh device collections. We can see that the Adaptiva PowerShell Tool Foundry test collection has been created. This can obviously go way beyond simply creating config manager collections and can be used for full automation of almost any conceivable task. Business workflows can be set to run on a schedule and can be used for automating key tasks, performing maintenance and state reports, integration into other automation tools or config manager task sequences, and many other use cases. I hope you can see just how powerful this level of integration and control can be and the degree of administrative power that this toolset provides. Thank you very much for watching.